Welcome to another episode of Conversations with the Candidates. This is a show that we pull out of the mothballs when it comes to speaking with candidates. A lot of times it's the local elections in Whitman, in Hanson. Today, we are privileged to be able to speak with yet another candidate who is seeking your vote come, I think, the 17th of May. That's the third Saturday in the month. We have Mr. Shawn Kain, who is joining us. Shawn, welcome back to Conversations with the Candidates.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So you are seeking your second term on the board. Talk to us about what is the first term? What has it been like for you, and how has it stimulated you to want to do and how run for a second term?
A couple of things, actually. I'm working with Mary Beth Carter right now and Kathy Keith, and I can't say enough positive things about those two. I mean, Mary Beth Carter is extremely thorough. She's extremely hardworking, and I'm kind of fascinated by the work that she does. I'm a teacher by trade, so getting to see a little bit behind the curtain of, what it takes to run a town. It's fascinating because there's so many different areas of knowledge that she needs to bring to the table, and expertise, and working with lawyers and stuff. I continue to be intrigued by the work, for sure. But the other part I would say is it's definitely kind of heavy. We're not in the best situation, so I feel like the responsibility of doing things well is really something that's, in the forefront of my mind. And it's an honor, I get to walk in the parade on Memorial Day, and it sounds like a small thing, but actually having to do that, it feels like I feel honored to do it. And that's just one example, but there are a number of events like that where I get to represent the town in a way, and it feels like this is impactful, this is important.
How often do you have folks walk up to you knowing that you're an elected official, ask you questions that maybe they don't understand certain things that are going on with the community, or maybe a recent meeting that the select board had?
Not very often. I mean, it definitely happens from time to time, and I like it because usually, I'm from Whitman, so there's a lot of people that know me from other connections and whatnot. Yeah. But I also like Whitman people. Whitman people will come up to you and say just what they think. I like you, or I don't like you. Yeah. I like this, no, I don't like that. And I like the direct feedback. I don't like when people kind of beat around the bush. I want someone to come up and say, listen, I didn't like when you did this, and I don't quite understand why. And then I can give an explanation, and I should have an explanation for why we did what we did, or I should listen to feedback and change, obviously, and that's the type of feedback that I really appreciate,
I think for the longest time, prior to you running and being elected, folks kind of saw you as the sixth select board member. There were a lot of times there during meetings that you would ask questions. You were unabashful in standing up and saying, I have questions about this. Where are things when it comes to this? Being a community activist and asking questions, especially when it came to the town's finances. What has it been like to be on the other side of that fence?
It was helpful, I think, to initially just be in meetings and to pay attention, to ask difficult questions. Yes. It allowed me to gain a certain perspective, for sure. On the other side is interesting because I guess, I hadn't thought about this before, but I guess if I was going to compare it to coaching, I've done a good amount of coaching in the past, and I don't think people realize how fragile programs are. Like, I grew up playing football at Whitman Hanson and wrestling for Whitman Hanson, and in the 90s, we had a very successful wrestling program and football program, and the program just felt like, how could it be any other way? Just a flourishing program feels good to be a part of. But when you get into coaching, you realize all of the logistical things necessary to keep a program afloat, and if you start skimming on certain things or you're not paying attention in certain areas, it's going to come back to bite you, and I think being on the inside with the town, playing more of a role, like say with the budget, it's really present on my mind to make sure that I'm trying to do things properly. And if you skimp in certain areas with the budget, it's going to come back to bite you. So I certainly feel the weight of that. trying to do things right, not overlooking the little things and focusing just on the big things, but really taking a balanced approach, because it seems apparent to me that these things are fragile, and if you're not careful, it can slip away.
What do you feel that this, whether it's what you accomplish, but I look at the select board as it's not just one individual accomplishing, it's you're accomplishing things as a group. So I'm asking it in such a manner. What do you feel that the group has accomplished during your time on there? And what unfinished business would you like to see tackled during your next term?
Well, I really like the board, the makeup of the current board. I think Justin is really on the ball, fine detail. He's brilliant about certain aspects of municipal government that I think is really clever, and I continue to learn a lot from him. Carl, I think his diplomatic way and just that he's been around for so long, I feel really privileged to serve with him because I just know he holds so much of what it means to be from Whitman and his leadership. And Dan is great, kind of like I was saying, other people from Whitman who you know exactly where he stands. He and I get along well, and I think his voice is one that people need to listen carefully to. And Laura's all heart. So I feel like we have a good makeup of the board. That seems like we've got to a good place of balance. We've accomplished, I think the biggest things that I'm proud of is the process-oriented things that we've really focused on. For instance, the budget is complex for a lot of reasons, obviously. Yeah. But we've planted some seeds probably 3 years ago that helped us get some grant money and develop some tools, logistical tools, to analyze the budget in a much more deep and meaningful way. So once we then got these tools, and that's something about municipal government is things don't happen overnight. You got to plant the seeds early, and then as time goes by, you need to keep it present on people's mind. You have to make it a priority because there's a number of things that are fighting for, short resources and your attention. So thankfully, I think we kept the financial stuff as a priority, planted the seeds early, so we had a number of specific tools that we used to analyze the budget in more depth. So we have a financial forecast now that is, our budget is called Article 2 in the town's operating budget. We now have, again, Mary Beth Carter, not just like a fine detailed Article 2 for fiscal year 26, that's what we're currently working on, but also for 27 and 28. And that's something that we didn't have in the past. It takes a lot of work. I can't emphasize how much work that actually takes, because she's looking at contracts and individuals and people who retire to make sure that as we're looking at our forecast, it's getting that much more detailed and precise. So I feel good about the process that we're following. I think that's going to help us in the future, but ultimately I think the reason why I like it is because it's just going to make the choices, I think, not easier for the people of Whitman, because I think we have some difficult choices. I think they'll be more intelligent about the choices they make because of some of that hard work that we put in. And I like that,
How do you balance the day-to-day responsibility of being a select board member with your long-term vision for the town of Whitman?
Yeah, I do have, I guess, long-term priorities, but it's slightly different than a long-term vision. And I think that's probably where my leadership style falls. I like working and building consensus. That's definitely been a major priority for me right now. It's kind of funny because years ago I would say that would almost come across as feeling a little bit, I wouldn't say weak, but I have strong convictions. And sometimes when you compromise, you have to ease up on your convictions a little bit. If it's in line with a specific vision that you're talking about.
Sure.
But I think more of my convictions have fallen in line more with the financial stuff, doing things properly, by the book. And I think as long as I'm staying close to those convictions, I can work with people on the finance committee and I can work with other select board members and Mary Beth Carter, the town administrator, to help the vision that she would like to see come for Whitman come about in a way that's process-oriented pertaining to things like, finance. So it's an interesting way that I think I've been able to kind of merge those two. But moving forward, I hope that if there was someone who moved into Whitman and came into town hall and started asking some questions, my hope is that, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, they'd be like, wow, these guys really do things properly. Not that they obviously agree with everything that we're doing, but the things that we're doing properly. That it's well thought out, there's strategy behind it, that kind of thing.
Well, to go along with your run for re-election, there's also another situation that's going on in town financial, and that is the need for a Proposition 2.5 override, somewhere in the area of just over, I think, $2 million. Give your thoughts on the need for this particular override, because I know that you and Justin Evans are kind of leading the conversation. I think Kathleen Otina, who is the chair of the Finance Committee, are also kind of a group that are out there kind of sharing information and better informing the residents.
Yeah. I think sometimes somebody will come up to me, I'm thinking of a specific situation, a gentleman came up to me and said, how come you guys just don't manage your budget the way that you'd have to do in business? If I have to live within my means, and you should just manage your budget that way. And it's a valid question. How come we're looking to increase people's taxes? Why don't we just make the cuts we need to cut and live within the budget that we have? And I take this kind of serious. When I'm preparing an override, it's not that I'm saying, listen, I'm going out to sell the override for these reasons, and this is why we need it. What I take seriously is we have a strategic priority, a financial strategic priority that says we want to create a financial plan that's in line with the services that our citizens expect. So if our citizens have come to expect a certain amount of services, and some people might fall more on public safety, some people might use the schools more, everybody kind of has the certain services that they use in town and rely on, the library. But when we're doing a financial forecast and we see that there's a deficit, meaning our expenditures are going to exceed our revenue, and the only way to rectify that would be to decrease services, I'm not comfortable as a select board member saying, listen, I'm going to make that choice myself as one of 5 and say, you know what, I'm going to take those services that we need to cut in order to make up the budget. I'm making the choice right now to cut them, and that's how we're going to balance the budget. That's not my style of leadership. For me, I would like to say, listen, we have this deficit, and this is, going to explain it in multiple different areas, and hopefully we can, explain it in a way that's digestible to the average person so they know why we're actually in this situation. But ultimately, it's your job, the people of the town at town meeting and at the election, to decide, you know what, I like the services that we have. I want to invest more in Whitman. It's going to be hard to increase my tax a little bit, but I'm willing to do it. So I'm voting for the override. But somebody else, I just came from a forum where there were some people telling like heartbreaking stories of, I'm on fixed income, I don't know if I can handle any more taxes, and this is something that could really push me out of town. And for somebody in that situation, they're going to vote no. And that's their prerogative. But for me, if you look at the organizational chart of Whitman, as opposed to like an organizational chart of like a private business, it might be an individual or, a corporate, a small corporate committee that is at the top of the organizational chart for a private institution. But for Whitman, at the top of the organizational chart are the people of Whitman.
Right.
It's town meeting, and it's the people when they vote. And that's ultimately who should make the choice. And I respect that.
Do the residents in Whitman understand that this isn't just a Whitman problem, that there are other neighboring communities? Neighboring town, Hanson, dealing with the same situation. Rockland. There are communities in and around the South Shore that are all suffering budget shortfalls and are going to their people saying, we need to do an override. Do residents realize this?
I think some do. Justin, again, has been doing a good job, like spreading some news about different municipalities in our
South Shore.news.
Yeah, South Shore.news, which is excellent. So you get an email in the morning and you can see Halifax is struggling with this, or Duxbury is struggling with that, and it's helpful to gain some perspective. I went back and I was listening to the beginning of the town meeting in 2018, and this is when Mr. Lynham, who was the town administrator at the time, he stood up and said, we've really reached a critical point where we're going to struggle to pay the bills if we stay within the 2.5. And we think our expenditures are out, are greater than our revenue, and we're going to start a committee, this is the budget override committee, to see if we need an override and what we can do to either help our situation or not. I really feel like the situation we're in now is directly connected to that. Over the last so many years, we followed many of the recommendations that committee
The Madden report?
Yeah, the Madden report.
Yes.
And it saved our community and money in a number of ways. And it was helpful. But for a lot of reasons, specifically revolving around fixed costs, I think utilities and healthcare and pension stuff, that's killing us right now. It's killing us, it's killing the schools, it's killing other towns. That's not something that's specific to Whitman. Healthcare is something that's a major priority for me to become more familiar with, and as far as financing goes, develop more strategies around, because our healthcare costs are high right now, much greater than 2.5%, often in the double digits. So developing strategies to help contain some of those fixed costs is definitely a priority for me, but it's a bear right now. It's a budget, it's killing us budget-wise.
Just want to kind of throw in a quick plug real quick for South Shore.news. It's AI generated, but it's also something that Justin Evans does, but it also relies on information from local access centers like Whitman Hills Community Access and a lot of the neighboring access centers. So local cable, even though folks talk about cutting the cable, it's important to keep cable, because if it isn't for access centers like Whitman Hills Community Access, you would not be seeing these meetings. Just quick little public service announcement to throw it out there that while cutting the cord for Comcast or Verizon is a cost-saving measure, it hinders what we do as well. You talk about, as far as that there's going to be effects if, in fact, the override does not pass. What services and departments are going to be affected? Do we know?
Yeah, I think Mary Beth Carter has a pretty good idea now. There's a couple different strategies that I think some select boards would follow. One being, listen, let's put something out there that the town's going to see and create some shock value to get more people out to support the override. I don't support that strategy. For me, I think it's very important. I think for like sincerity, integrity purposes, to really communicate to people, the services that will be cut if the override fails. We're going to try to put together a combination that is in the least impactful way possible. So not, dumping it all on one thing just to, again, create shock value to get people out, but really rolling up our sleeves and thinking meaningfully about how can we do this in a way that we can kind of get by and it won't be so bad. That being said, it's going to affect all departments. We're looking at some public safety. We're looking at some public works. We're looking at some people who work in the town hall. It's going to be across the board, and there's no other way around it. I was just saying, I was looking back at 2018, and I think this is directly connected to that, the path that we've been on. But for all those years, we've been trying as hard as we can not to have an override. We're trying to live within our means. We're trying to be as efficient as possible. So we've been going out of our way, and it's been a major priority to find cost-saving measures and to find little bits of revenue that will help. So we're at a point where there's no secret play. You know what I mean? It's down to personnel mostly, which is too bad.
How are you working to ensure that residents understand the override and its implications? And earlier you mentioned about forums. I think there's been 2 so far.
Yep.
There's one coming up on May 1st. Is that the one of the ways that you're trying to let folks know what they're in for? At town meeting, but if it passes town meeting, it's not a done deal. It has to pass on May 17th.
Yeah. Yeah, again, Mary Beth Carter and Kathy Keefe, they're doing multiple things. I mean, we had a couple forums. There's one that's posted online. We've been talking about it at the select board meeting. It's on the website. You know, I think they're doing all the things that you're supposed to be doing. Again, the key for me is I want to make sure people feel informed and that people feel comfortable asking questions. If you come to a forum and you have an honest question, a difficult question, there's something that's been bothering you, that's making you frustrated, that you want to ask. You should be able to ask that, and you should be able to get answers. I want that to be the environment of the forums that we have, or if somebody comes to the select board meeting, I want them to be able to pull me aside or to ask a public comment. Ask a hard question. I mean, that you kind of alluded to this at the beginning of the interview. I was somebody who would go to a select board meeting and ask a hard question. I think that makes our system better. I don't think it makes us worse. I think when more people feel comfortable going and asking hard questions or voicing frustration in a respectful way, obviously, but the problem is, I think if people feel resentful, or if they feel frustrated, or they feel like there's a lack of understanding, and they don't come to us and ask so that we can feel that feedback and either update our system or give them the knowledge that they seek, then there are pockets of frustration all around us in our community. I don't like that. I hope that over time people feel more comfortable coming and playing an active role.
As a member of the select board, as a candidate, do you feel that the town's financial planning and budgeting process have been transparent throughout? If not, do you foresee any improvements down the road?
Yeah, I think we do a pretty good job, but I want us to be like the flagship for Massachusetts. I want someday to be like, listen, if you want to know how budgeting should happen, check out Whitman. We're not there yet, but I think we have a lot of the pieces kind of slowly moving into place. We certainly have the leadership. I think Mary Beth Carter is, again, she's extremely thorough. She's the hardest working person I know. She's from Whitman. She's in it for the right reasons. This isn't like a stepping stone so she can get some other job or whatnot, I really think she wants to do things properly, and I think her priorities and mine really line up that way.
It's interesting you mentioned Mary Beth, because prior to being the town administrator, she was the long-serving treasurer collector.
Yeah.
There's also a conversation going on about taking that from being an elected position and making it appointed. What's your thoughts on that? And I know it's not an easy question to ask, and I know that the answer isn't as easy either.
Yeah. Listen, being from Whitman, and my understanding of Whitman people is they don't like when you try to take authority away from them, period. And I think that's the thing that people don't want to hear. Like right now, we currently elect the treasurer collector. You want to take away our ability to elect them. And I think we need to hear that loud and clear. The piece that really gets me, where I listen carefully to Mary Beth Carter, is when she makes the argument this way. Right now, in order for us to elect a treasurer collector, they have to be from Whitman, they have to be qualified, and they have to be willing to go through a campaign. And not everybody's kind of willing to do that. It can be like you have to give interviews and you put under scrutiny. It's not the most comfortable thing in the world, obviously. But if we changed it, anybody who's qualified within a radius of a commuting radius, so say 30 miles, we can then interview and potentially hire, still through a public process. So although I feel for people saying, you're kind of taking away our autonomy, and I don't want to do that. I think it's one of the things that I love about our community. The bottom line is we're losing valuable candidates, and it's a critical professional position that if we don't do right, it really has strong implications for the town's finances. So I'm on the fence, but I'm leaning towards I want to get the right person in that role who's going to stay there and keep us on track.
And knowing that this is a $50 million plus entity called the town of Whitman, you want to make sure that whoever the individual is doing right when it comes to the collection of taxes and letting folks know when they got excise taxes. You know, whatever that office, when it comes to collecting taxes, I mean, the revenue is king.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
We just got a couple of minutes left here. The time has wound up fast. What's your long-term vision for the financial stability of the town?
I think there's something really special about a small town like Whitman that is self-sufficient. Right now, we're not self-sufficient. There are factors somewhat beyond our control, but there are factors that make us vulnerable. I think over time, like I said, there's something special about small communities that can become stronger with time financially and really be self-sufficient. And I think that's the ultimate goal, for sure.
Okay. If you're reelected, come May 17th, so what are your top 3 priorities for the next term? And this is beyond the immediate budget needs at this particular time, but what are some of your top priorities?
Well, I think working closely with the Finance Committee is helpful. Ms. Otina is extremely knowledgeable and she's experienced. So they have that on one end, and a couple other guys, Chuck Colby, extremely knowledgeable and experienced. But they also have some new members. So I think really facilitating that relationship and collaborating more, I think is really helpful. Also, I need to listen carefully to the department heads. Their department heads right now, police and fire are obvious, but there are small department heads that really, they feel some unique tensions that I need to be aware of. So for me personally, I guess I want to be a good listener and play a bigger role as like getting to know the nuances of their departments and understand how I can serve them better. Lastly, I think we've had a contentious relationship with the school committee for obvious reasons pertaining to the budget. Developing systems that will allow us to work better together, because, and I would include Hanson in this, 2 of us can be doing well, meaning the town of Whitman can be doing pretty well. We can have, systems in place that are like really keeping us on track. The regional school system, they could be doing the same, but if any one of the 3, if Hanson was struggling, then it's going to have a major impact on our budget. So I think the growth of communication and collaboration and likely compromise with both the regional school district and the town of Hanson is definitely something that I want to get better at.
Okay. Kind of an open-ended question, and that is there anything that I haven't asked you during this conversation, but you feel it's warranted for you to take a moment or two to kind of mention or discuss?
Well, I think the thing that probably surfaces for me right now is if I was sending a message to, a 28-year-old, newly married, about to have children, and they're thinking about where should they live, like say on the South Shore. The message that I would send to them is like, Whitman is an awesome place to raise kids. It's an awesome place to have a family. It's a great place to live throughout different phases of your life. We don't compare with like a Duxbury if the things that you're looking for are high-end this and high-end that. But as a parent and as somebody who was raised here, raising your children in a blue-collar community that is ethical, with good people, with neighbors that know each other, with people who are in government, hopefully for the right reasons, which I really think people in Whitman are. People who have strong opinions, who aren't afraid to ask hard questions, but getting all that dynamic. Sometimes with the budget, things tend to be kind of negative, but I think the message I would send to a young family is like, I love it here, and I think it's an awesome place to raise a family, and I hope you really consider us. It's an honor to serve.
If folks wanted to reach out to you, if they had questions about your campaign, about the override, is there a way for them to do that?
Well, it's fairly easy probably through social media, Facebook, to send a message. I think that would be probably, if you don't know me from a distance, that might be. Otherwise, you can call the town hall and definitely just talk to Mary Beth Cotter and you can get in touch with me. My email is Kain, Kain, .Shawn, SHAWN, @gmail. And I check my email often, so I would happily get back to somebody pretty quickly. But
I want to thank you for being my guest, to talking about your campaign for re-election and talking about the override. And we want to thank you for tuning into a program like Conversations with the Candidates. The idea is to better inform you when you go to vote come May 17th. Now remember also, May 17th, it isn't necessarily just about the candidates that are on the ballot, but you will also, I believe, have a couple of ballot questions. I think one of them will be about the override in Whitman, but I also think that the vote tech is one of those that will be on there as well. But you want to find all the information on what's going to be on the ballot or how you can vote, contact the town clerk's office. That's the easiest way. Until our next conversation, have a great day.